In the last session, we talked about the importance of things like data quality, data governance, and making sure that you've got the right kind of teams looking at your actual data before you start thinking about technology. In today's session, which is focusing on kind of the next stage of this, is which we touched on last time towards the end of the session, is how to get buy-in from across the business, and how to get the key stakeholders bought into your MDM or PIM project. So what in your opinion, what's the importance of telling stories when you're trying to get buy-in from across the business into a big project like an MDM or PIM implementation?
You've got to somehow capture the hearts and minds of the executive leadership, your business stakeholders, the rest of the enterprise that tends to be, in some cases, scared of IT and data-oriented things, or simply doesn't care about them. So if you're dealing with your executive leadership and you need to get funding for data management, for MDM, for PIM, which we all do, you've got to be able to share with them some form of narrative that shows how that work, as critical as it is going to enable the strategic intention of that enterprise. A lot of people fall into this description of the technical implementation. And I pride myself on the fact that I focus on the why rather than the how. The how's important. You've got to get it done. But I've never had a CEO interrupt me and say, how are you going to do it? But they'll often interrupt and go, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
In some cases, why are you even talking to me about this? I've had people say that, I get better at telling stories, but you've got to get that engagement, and that comes through telling stories. And storytelling, data storytelling is probably the hottest, non-technical thing going on in the data space. But this idea of it has been focused almost primarily on the analytics side of the business, telling stories with data, but we also have to tell stories about our data, about why managing data is of strategic importance to the company.
That makes total sense. And Stuart and Dan, I mean, you guys do this on a daily basis in terms of, helping organizations understand their data, and understand what it's going to do to change their business for the better. So, Stuart, I mean, you and Scott have talked at length about this in other sessions, but what would you add to that in terms of, telling this story, finding the right audience? Where would you start with it?
I think using the semiotics of Scott wearing white and me wearing black. The other story is, as well, that you need to make sure that the executives know, and the people, it's what it's not going to do for you. Because you'll get software vendors, you'll go to a conference or listen to something that will extol all these virtues of implementing MDM, implementing PIM. It's going to solve all your problems. Oh, we need data governance, don't we? We really need data governance. Saying that without actually knowing what it actually means to have data governance and what benefits that can lead to. So it's important to be able to almost soften the message and say, yes, this vendor says that it can do these 10 things, but actually only 3 of them are relevant to you. And you've got another 2 things that you need to sort out as well. And this isn't going to fix that for you. And those other 2 things could be the people things. They could be the culture things that you can't fix with technology, as we talked about in the last section. But it also could be functionality. Not all data problems are solved by a PIM or an MDM. Not all data problems are solved by data governance. It could be a suite of solutions and a suite of change.
And do you think when you're talking to those kind of executive teams, when you're saying this is not what it's, this is what it might not be able to do you think positioning that at the start of the project is important? Because then when you then have the project implemented and they think, well, why doesn't it do this? You've set their expectation of what they're going to get at the back of the project.
I think it's important, isn't it, that they understand that the technology is just one segment of it, and it's you've got to get that message across pretty early doors. I mean, I've been in conversations, when we come to RFPs in the next session, I've been in conversations where people have said, well, do we go with this solution or this solution? And it's kind of like they've got down to 2, and it's like, well, they can both do the job, and it's just a case of picking whichever one works. However, the main thing now is getting the right foundations in place and actually understanding that this is just one part of it, and understanding exactly what it's going to do. And to Scott's point, why are we doing this? What's the foundations we're trying to lay here? Mm-hmm. And then from there, it should make it easier to make a case for the stuff. I think sometimes once you've got to the point we know we need tech, it's easy to convince people to spend that money. It's the money that goes with it in terms of we've got to do the process improvements, the governance. We've got to kind of maybe retrain people. We've got to, there's other people elements and that sort of stuff. We've
probably all bought a car where we've gone into the showroom and gone, well, this is what I need. This is what I need. Then you sit in something else that's got a few extra buttons. It does a few extra things. And you go, yes, I've got to have this. Never use it. Never press that button when you bought it. You've spent an extra £2,000 or whatever. But it's very easy to do that when you're selecting software, when you're selecting anything.
Everything demos well. So, right, everything demos because data in the demo is perfect. And so that will give people the illusion that their data will behave that way when in fact the tool will just work off of whatever you give it. I kind of liken, software advertising is very similar to airline advertising, right? We're going to take you here. We're going to have great service. We're going to do all these wonderful things. You're going to, they show the person at the other end of the trip. But if you go to an airline, they're not going to tell you where to go. You've got to have an intention. Where am I going? Why am I going there? So it's to get dazzled by some of this stuff. And my experience is upper level senior leadership doesn't succumb to that a lot because they shouldn't even be exposed to demos at a certain point. They still have to understand that why. And if I can go back to that, for me, the counsel I give people when they say, all right, how do I figure out the why? How do I figure out why this is important to the organization? If you boil down every enterprise, the purpose of every company, the reason every company exists is to deliver value to their relationships through their brands at scale. The at scale part requires technology, hardware, software, data. You can't do it at scale without the things that we're talking about, and especially that foundation. But you fill in the blanks when you think about, all right, what are our relationships? Customers, vendors, partners, prospects. What are our brands, products, services, offerings? All of a sudden, you go very quickly from this high-level conceptual idea of delivering value to relationships through your brands at scale to specific master data domains that manage the data about those relationships, about those brands, about the offerings that you've got. So for me, you can draw a very clear and immediate connection between the strategy of a company. If you listen, every strategy of every company includes something about their relationships and about their brands to the data they've got about those domains.
Makes sense. Just quick one to jump in, and I know this isn't a massively long session, so I know this is a broad question that I'm sure you could wax lyrical about, Scott, for hours and hours. But what kind of, coming back to the stories you're telling, obviously data is data, right? So how do you take data and take it to those upper levels and tell a story? How do you construct a story around data that's going to make an impact and make people sit?
Again, I back into, and Stuart's got his data waggling methodology, which I love, and I take the same the same kind of thing. Where it's and we talked a little bit. All right, here's what this functionality is. Here's what the software does. Flip it around. Go figure out what your company's trying to do, attempting to do, and can't do, and show how better data is going to enable that, especially around these core domains: customer, vendor, relationships, brands, assets, all these things that we live and breathe every day. They're talking about how they want to transform their customer experience, or they want to take their services at a company. They sell products, but they want to start to license the value of that product as a service. Very strategic intention there, moving from selling widgets to licensing the value of a widget on a subscription model. These are board level discussions that companies have in terms of their transformation. You can't do any of that without the kind of data we're talking about. Period. Dot. It just will not happen. So get into those conversations. Learn what your company's trying to do. You will find the data element in it for sure. Even if your CEO isn't saying anything about data, They might say digital. And, you know, with all respect, there's plenty of business folks who don't realize the direct connection. Digital means data, data needs data management, you know, and checkmate in 2 moves here. So it's really listening to your own company and not being focused on the kind of tactical within the project myopic view that a lot of folks kind of focus on, but open that up and show how you bring horizontal value to the company that you're representing.
I'm just going to add just one thing in terms of telling stories quite often where people don't necessarily understand the situation and why they maybe need to invest. Sometimes I find pictures are I know it sounds crazy, but just one picture sometimes can tell a story much easier than kind of words sometimes, and quite often in organizations, particularly where you're talking to someone at a board level who's got very limited time and needs to very quickly understand things, something as straightforward that shows relationships between things, that can show kind of flows of things, and then show it, and then red, amber, green things, and immediately it brings that picture to life in terms of here's where your pain points are, here's where your problems are, maybe then here's where your opportunities are. And the number of times I've used that at different organizations, and it brings the room to life. And that could be in a situation of, are we ready to go live? Are we ready to progress? You know, what things do we need to tackle? And they're very helpful in helping vendors understand where the issue is as well.
Yeah.
I draw the
saying, Dan, is you go on. I was going to say Dan prefers comic books to novels, obviously, but.
just draw one of those danagrams that you were talking about, mate.
Danagrams and danimations. That's the. Sorry, Scott.
When you draw it too, and my tip graphically is you always put it on the bottom. It's a foundation. Master data, data governance on the bottom. Some people try and put it on the side or on the top, which is the worst place to put it, or in the center because they want to be. It's on the bottom, right? It's the foundation for all of those silos that you've got there. It's the horizontal value across all these verticals. It's as simple as describing, this is how I've described it to some folks. It's a row that connects all the columns. I mean, at its basic, most simplest level, if you think about, you know, a table, you've got lots of columns of attributes and information, but that data in those attributes and information, that's about the row. What is the row? Right? Master data is the row part of the conversation. So just simplifying it, graphics work, pictures work, keep them at the high level conceptual view rather than getting too deep into the physical.
That sounds good. Good advice. Stuart, I'm just going to end with you on this session because I think we're right. You know, the stories obviously are the thing people need to tell to be able to sell things internally. But Scott's referenced it, and I know you've done this many times before, but we've just heard about your data waggling. So could you give us a quick waggle and explain your data waggling to us?
Well, Scott summed it up very nicely without doing that. But it's about taking that vision, taking what you're trying to achieve as a business and mapping the big data blocks to it. So if we want to increase the number of customers that we have, something very, very simple to say, very hard to do, there are big data blocks. That's large data blocks, not big data blocks. Right. There are large data blocks that underpin that. And you then just break that down into the next level of detail and the next level of detail and the next level of detail. And eventually you get to your elemental bits of data that you can test the data quality of. Mm-hmm. If everything down here that's attached to stuff up there is good, then you're going to get more customers. Or more precisely, your data isn't going to stop you from getting more customers. Just having the right data doesn't mean that you're going to have a successful business. Having the wrong data can mean that you don't have a successful business.
Absolutely.
A really good example of that I experienced, I did it with a global enterprise. They had the vision of their company, literally, that was published in their Investor Day presentation was, we aspire to be the premier partner of choice to our customers, vendors, employees, and so on. So you just take that first part of the phrase, the premier partner of choice with our customers. we took a look at the data they had about their customers, about those relationships, and used an example that showed an extremely large customer they had in a region. They had 185 copies of the same record. I mean, just there's no way to explain that. They weren't like different logistical shipping points. It was just horrific data. And so even something using that anecdotal type of evidence that says your leadership thinks it's going to be able to be the premier partner of choice with their customers, and look at, you don't have the data to back it up.
Yeah.
You've got to cleanse this. You've got to structure this. You've got to get this aligned. Otherwise, you will not meet that need and that objective that your own leadership has set. So sometimes those really tactical kind of rubbing somebody's nose in the bad data, I used to call it telling somebody their baby's ugly. You know, it's a painful process, but you got to show them, look, you're saying all this great stuff, but you spell street 52 different ways. All right. I mean, you can't get there from here.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up. And I think, I think if we take anything away from this is the importance of telling stories. I think if we go back to Scott's first point, it's that focusing on the why. Why are you doing these things? Whether, like you say, it's the company's, it's their vision, they want to get somewhere, they want to do something. Whether it's Stuart's, data waggling, where you've got a specific objective, to get more customers, sell more things, whatever it is. Being able to pull something down here that's going to change that at the top. I think that's the stories you need to tell. Need to focus on the why you're doing it, not the how you're doing it. And I think that's a really good takeaway from today's session. So thank you all. I think that's we can wrap that up there. But on the next session, we're going to talk about, once you've got your data in order, once you're happy with your data, once you've got everybody's buy-in, is then how you go about selecting the right vendor, the right partner. So we're going to talk about RFPs. We're going to talk about how to put the right kind of selection documentation together to do that. So we'll see you on the next session. Thanks, everyone.